One of my favorite things to do is in August, we get a head start on what everyone else is going to be talking about in October or November because we got our ear to the ground. We're very blessed to have an extensive network of team insiders and sourcing all across the country. So we normally get ahead of the curve by days to weeks on stuff that's happening in fall camp. This is important to you if you're a hardcore fan. It's critical to you if you bet this sport or if you just have an interest in it. So let's get started with this, and we'll probably lead most of our shows in August with this. Fall camp intel, really wanted to start with the national champ, the Georgia Bulldogs, and I wanted to start the corner position. Defensive back in general, but specifically the corner position, I think it's one of the most critical position battles in the SEC and in all of college football, because this right here is a bona fide national championship contender. And I was talking to someone last week, and they talked about Darian Kendrick last year. Darian Kendrick ended up being a 6th-round draft pick. He started at corner for Georgia. And because Georgia's defensive front was so good, they were able to, in some ways, hide Darian Kendrick. Darian Kendrick was not, one of the better corners to ever come through Georgia, but he was more than serviceable with the defensive front they had last year because the pass rush they got, especially on the interior, made it such that you didn't have to cover for an extended period of time, nor did teams have any disillusion that they were going to throw on you regularly. Well, this year, you know about all the draft departures for Georgia up front, which is why I don't just look at who's going to replace Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. Everyone's talking about that. But in Athens, you know what else they're talking about? And in these practices, you know what else they're looking at? They're looking at Keely Ringo as a dependable number one corner. And then the other side of the field, who can we trust over there? Is it Nyland Green? Is it Kamari Lassiter? Is it a number of other names? They're not short on talent. This is not do they have anyone that's adequately prepared to be plugged in there from a talent standpoint? But I did use the word prepared on purpose. Do they have guys that they can trust? Because I don't know, nor do you know, if Georgia's defensive front is going to be, in fact, I'll tell you they won't be as dominant as they were last year. They'll be very good. Still got a lot of those names you remember from the recruiting ranks. Very good there. But it's reasonable to expect a little bit of drop-off up front from a generational type defense, which doesn't really mean anything except you probably need to focus a little bit more on this corner battle. They haven't scrimmaged down there yet. We'll start to get a little bit better feel about that other corner position once they do. But those are just two names among several to keep an eye on. I heard Rusty Manziel and the guys over at Dogs 24/7 talking about this the other day, and Nyland Green was a name. I heard him mention. Kamari Lassiter was a name I heard him mention. It is a critical piece to them trying to repeat as national champs. It's a critical piece to what they'll try and do in the SEC this year. Next up, let's go to Lincoln, Nebraska. I know I timed that up poorly, Colin. I'm sorry. But we're going to go to Nebraska anyway. I think a lot of you have heard the stat about how many one-possession losses they had last year and over the last few years. You've heard that. If you've been tuned into this sport and this show over the past several months, that is old hat. I know a lot of people are dropping that on you because they believe in the offseason. So they haven't been talking about this for 9 months, it seems like. But we have. So I'm not going to regurgitate all those old stats. Nebraska lost a bunch of games over the last couple of years that they almost won. That's the stat. How are they going to change that? That's the unknown, and that's what we're focused on with Nebraska right now. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. His name's Mark Whipple. I think a lot of you may even know that. Casey Thompson. Maybe less of you know that starting quarterback last year at Texas. He's the quarterback now at Nebraska. Now in the spring, this is one of those programs where some people tried to pass it off as a quarterback battle. It never was. You didn't really see Casey play in the spring game. Didn't matter. He was always going to be the starter here, barring injury. Scott Frost, now that we're in fall camp, has been a little bit more forthcoming with that. I think the other day he just outright said it's Casey Thompson's job to lose. So, you know the movie Independence Day. We were watching this for research purposes, of course, out in the bullpen earlier. And there's that scene where the aliens, time's up, they attack. Washington, D.C. starts to get blown up, and Air Force One's trying to get off the ground. And Bill Pullman, as he usually does, comes through in the clutch, and they just get Air Force One off the ground in time. I mean, flames nipping at the tail of Air Force One. I don't think Nebraska's start to 2022 will be very dissimilar to that scene from Independence Day. You got Mark Whipple, think we can trust him. You got Casey Thompson at quarterback, think we can trust him. We just completely emptied the transfer portal in hopes of getting immediate help here at Nebraska. We think we can trust him. There's a lot of think. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of fingers crossed that we can get this thing to take off smoothly. Luckily, you're not opening with Oklahoma. You are opening with Northwestern in Ireland, no less. But the takeoff for this season with new everywhere is going to be kind of like that Air Force One takeoff. It's going to be shaky. It could be bumpy. It's going to be white knuckle for a little while, and you just hope it all holds together. Now, you're confident if you can win those first few games, if you win against Northwestern, if you don't get tripped up against, I think it's, there it is, North Dakota, Georgia Southern. You get a month into the season, and at that point, you kind of have a better idea of what you have. But to start the season, I think even the most optimistic of Nebraska fan knows what I'm talking about. There's just so much unknown. Even optimistic unknown is still unknown. And so that's kind of what I feel like. And that's what some of the sentiment that I've heard them express from around the program is we just got a lot of things that we hope are going to work out. And we got confidence eventually they will, but that eventually is not going to matter if it all of a sudden clicks in late October. Because by late October, your season could be down the drain. And so that week 0, bumpy, potential turbulence, but they could still take that thing off, and it could win by 7, not even cover the spread. A win for Nebraska football, a win is a win in week 1. Get that win, get back home to the United States of America in Lincoln, Nebraska, and then just trying to settle into a stride. Next up, I wanted to go to Texas. What do you think about Bijan Robinson? Think he's the best running back in college football? I think a lot of people do. You look at Preview Magazine season is upon us, and I think most publications out there have Bijan Robinson either rated one of or the best running back in America. I don't disagree for the record, even though it sounds like what I'm going to say is negative. It's just that when you reach this lofty a status, you're held to a different standard. And so it's fair to pick apart little individual aspects of your game. I think a lot of Texas fans understand, but the nation may not. Bijan Robinson is average at best in pass pro. Phenomenal everywhere else, but the one aspect of his game where he's struggled is pass protection. In fact, Chip Brown over at Horns 24/7 was writing about this the other day, and this is kind of something that scouts have reiterated. I assume he's heard this from scouts. Roschon Johnson is far and away their best running back in terms of pass pro. Keelan Robinson may be better than Bijan Robinson in terms of pass pro. Now, what does that mean? Well, for Texas this year, it may mean a lot because to maximize the potential of this offense, yeah, of course you got to have Quinn Ewers come through for you. Yeah, of course Isaiah Nair transferred in. Ideally, a couple of those Bama guys would pan out for you, but you have a great unknown along the offensive line. You have, like I said, a new starter at quarterback. What does it greatly behoove you to have at running back? It greatly behooves you to have a dynamite skill guy with plus pass protection in his back pocket. You know, when you're looking at his player rating, you need to have a plus next to that pass pro column. And Bijan Robinson hasn't always had that there. It is something they are hammering very, very hard in fall camp because it is something, like I just said, that's not rocket science. All those coaches know that. They've got to have that, at least be average, if not better. I saw that, Jesse. I'm going to screenshot that later. They got to at least have that be average because every other aspect of his game is NFL ready. Pass protection is what they're working on there. It's not nitpicking. I want to stress this. This is kind of how we handle this fall intel segment. I just give you what I'm hearing from the respective camps, but the reason it's so important, even within the context of Texas, is because of what I just said. If you don't know what you have on the offensive line, and if you got a new quarterback back there, man, if you also add suspect pass pro at the running back position, well, there's things you can't do. I mean, that's as simple as it is. There are things you can't do. Next up, and I'm going to talk about a team now that's a little bit ahead of everyone else because they've got a week 0 game, and that's Florida State. In fact, Florida State's already scrimmaged. I think they just had their first scrimmage this weekend. And it's kind of hard to tell, at least from the people I spoke with, it's hard to tell how improved they are offensively. It's not hard to tell that they're improved. It is hard to tell how improved they are. And this has been a theme that I've noticed, and I've spoken about a couple times on the show, about Florida State. I've felt ever since Mike Norvell got there that they've trended in the right direction. They may not have always trended that way as fast as Florida State fans want. They may still fit that description of kind of incrementally improving, but not leaps and bounds improving. And granted, through one scrimmage, which not a ton should be taken away from, it still feels like that. So we're going to get a little deeper into camp. They got Duquesne in week 0. They got LSU then in week 1. We'll ultimately, get our answer. We just have to guess until then. But Jordan Travis at quarterback was a guy that we've spoken a lot about over the past few months. about the fact that not just Jordan Travis, he's the guy pulling the trigger back there at quarterback, but their entire passing game was not good enough last year. Multiple games below 200 yards. And so that's got to improve. Does it sound like it? Well, every time, and I was reading Brendan Sinone's stuff over at Knowles 24/7 earlier today, every time that I've spoken with someone or I've read his work about talking about what happened in this first scrimmage, it's been kind of like that. It's been kind of, Jordan Travis is pretty good. But, and then there's a but, there's mixed results, you know. You always have the defense ahead of the offense in the first scrimmage, which is true. I'd kind of be a little worried if I had Jordan Travis and company just lighting me up through the air. It wouldn't exactly bode well. But at the same time, you know, you want to see a healthy amount of execution on both sides. It's just that quarterback, it sounds like incremental improvement. Wide receiver, maybe some incremental improvement. Offensive line now, they're worlds better, I think at least, than they have been over the last couple of years. Defense, incremental improvement. It's hard to get a read on how much that matters when we look at their schedule and we look at what they were last year, which was missing a bowl game, and where they want to be this year, which is at least that 7 to 8 win range. I don't know how many close games they're playing. I don't know how much they need to incrementally improve to get themselves to 7 or 8 wins. I mean, 8 wins this year for Florida State, to me, would be a home run. And it's going to take improvement. It just may take a little bit more than incremental improvement, but then again, we're through one scrimmage, so we don't really know anything yet. This is tip of the iceberg stuff. This is kind of an abbreviated version of what the real hardcore camp intel segments will be over the coming weeks, because I want to stress, some of these programs have not even put pads on yet. They're in the process of doing that, certainly haven't scrimmaged yet. And that's why a lot of what I hear, you know, a lot of what has been sent to the eye, Josh, I've sort of filtered out of the show so far. That will not be the case in the coming weeks. I got folks, I love them, but they're trying to make full indictments on guys before they've gotten out of shells. And I just want to pump the brakes a little bit, because we've been victims on this show even, believe it or not, we have been victims of getting married to perceptions that we make after 1 week of fall camp. And that's dangerous. It's very dangerous. It could ultimately end up costing you money.